The dust inside the church was so thick, it felt like it could choke a person before the vows ever did. It was a dry Tuesday in a dying town that had not seen rain in 6 months. The air outside shimmered with heat, but inside the small wooden church, the mood was colder than winter. Evelyn Hayes stood at the altar in a white dress that had once belonged to her mother. She was only 18. The man beside her, Harland Riggs, was at least twice her age. Some said 40, some said 50. No one truly knew. No one dared to ask. Harland was a man of land and power, a widower twice over, a ranch owner whose property stretched across 3 counties, a man whose silence weighed heavier than any shout. His thumb pressed into the back of Evelyn's hand, hard and possessive, as her father rushed through the wedding words. Evelyn did not look at Harland. She kept her eyes on the cracked wooden cross behind her father's head. Her father's voice trembled as he spoke. He was not trembling with joy. He was trembling with shame. He had debts, gambling debts, and Harland Riggs had paid them. 2 nights earlier, a heavy purse of gold had been delivered to the parsonage. By morning, the whispers in town had stopped. The preacher's honor had been restored, and his daughter had been sold. And do you, Evelyn, take this man? She smelled whiskey on Harland's breath. It mixed with sweat and dust. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But she saw her mother in the front pew, thin and tired, and broken by years of her father's weakness. "I do," Evelyn whispered. It was barely a sound, but it was enough, while Harland's grip tightened as he slid a thick gold ring onto her finger. It was too big. It felt like a shackle. The walk from the church to Harland's ranch house felt like a march to a prison. He did not offer her a buggy. He made her walk beside him. His hand clamped around her upper arm as if she might bolt at any second. The ranch house stood at the edge of town, large and dark. It smelled of stale tobacco and old grief. A servant girl with frightened eyes hurried away when they entered. "Upstairs," Harland grunted. Evelyn climbed the stairs slowly. Each step felt like a hammer against her chest. He followed behind her. She could hear his boots on the wood. The bridal suite was lit by a single candle. The room was clean but bare. A heavy bed frame, a wash basin, a tall wardrobe. Harland shut the door, and the sound of the lock clicking into place made her flinch. He did not speak to her at first. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and drank it in one swallow, then another. "Take it off," he said. Her hands fumbled with the tiny buttons on the back of her dress. Her fingers felt numb. She turned her back to him, trying to keep some small piece of modesty. "Slow," he growled. "I want to watch." Her breath caught in her throat. That was when she saw it. Hanging on a peg near the wardrobe was a thick leather belt. It was not meant for trousers. It was heavy, dark, oiled. It hung there like a threat. Her eyes dropped to the nightstand. The drawer was slightly open. Something inside glinted in the candlelight. Metal. She stepped closer, pretending to fix the quilt. She nudged the drawer. Inside lay a pair of handcuffs. But her blood ran cold. This was not a marriage bed. This was a trap. "I said take it off," Harland repeated, standing up. He reached for her. Evelyn did not think. She ran. She lunged for the door, forgetting it was locked, and slammed her shoulder into the wood. Pain shot down her arm. Harland laughed. "Nowhere to run," he said. But he was wrong. She saw the window. With shaking hands, she grabbed the heavy water pitcher from the wash basin and threw it. It shattered against the wall, buying her a second. She seized a chair and rammed it through the glass. Cold night air rushed in. Harland roared. Evelyn climbed through the broken window. Glass sliced her arms. She fell hard into the dirt below, but forced herself up. She ran across the yard, past the barn, into the dark scrub brush beyond the ranch. Behind her, she heard shouting, "Get the horses! She's mine!" She ran barefoot into the canyon, her white wedding dress glowing in the moonlight like a signal fire. She tore at the skirt so she could move. Rocks cut her feet. Sagebrush ripped at her skin. The sound of hooves echoed behind her. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out. She climbed higher into the rocky ridges, the air growing colder with every step. Finally, on a wind-swept ridge, she collapsed. The cold wrapped around her like a blanket. She curled into herself. Maybe it would be warm soon. Colt Mason hated towns. He lived high in the mountains, trapping and hunting, coming down only when he needed salt or cartridges. That morning, he had been tracking a buck near Bear Ridge when his horse stopped. Quiet snorted and lifted his head. Colt scanned the ridge. At first, he thought it was snow. Then he saw the shape. A woman lay crumpled against the rocks in a torn white dress. He swore under his breath. This was trouble. The kind that could get a man hanged. He should ride away. He took one step back. Then he heard it. A small, broken moan. He closed his eyes. He could not leave her. Colt dismounted and approached carefully. He touched her neck. Her skin was ice cold, but there was a pulse. Faint. He lifted her in his arms. She weighed almost nothing. "You're trouble," he muttered. He carried her to his horse and rode back to his cabin, shielding her from the wind with his body. Inside the small one-room cabin, he laid her on the cot and built a fire. He cleaned the cuts on her feet and arms. He wrapped them gently. He worked fast but careful. When her eyes fluttered open, they were filled with terror. "No," she whispered. "Please don't." "You're safe," he said quietly. "You're in my cabin." Her gaze focused on him. For a moment, confusion replaced fear. "An angel," she murmured. "Am I dead?" "You're not dead," Colt said. "Not yet." Outside, snow began to fall. By morning, the world was buried in white, and Evelyn Hayes was snowed in on Bear Ridge with a man who had no idea what kind of storm he had just brought into his life. The snow did not stop for 3 days. It buried the ridge, sealed the narrow path, and turned Colt's cabin into an island of wood and smoke in a world of white. Inside, the fire crackled low and steady. Outside, the wind screamed like something alive. Evelyn woke slowly, her body aching in places she did not know she had. Her feet throbbed under the bandages. Her throat felt raw. For a moment, she did not know where she was. Then she saw him. Colt sat near the fire, sharpening a knife. His shoulders were broad. His movements were slow and careful. He looked up when he heard her shift. "You're awake," he said. She tried to sit up, but dizziness forced her back down. Panic flickered across her face. "Where am I?" "Bear Ridge," he answered. "My cabin. You near froze." The memory rushed back. The wedding, the belt, the window, the chase. Her breathing quickened. "They'll come," she whispered. "No one's coming up here in this storm," he said calmly. For the first time, she truly looked at him. He was tall, even sitting. His hair was dark and tied back. His beard was rough. His face looked carved from stone, but his eyes were steady. Not greedy. Not hungry. Just steady. But for 3 days, they existed in silence. He fed her broth and water. He rewrapped her feet every morning. He never asked her name, never asked why she had been alone in a wedding dress on a frozen ridge. His silence unsettled her more than questions would have. On the 4th morning, the storm broke. Sunlight streamed through the small window. Snow covered everything in sight. "We're snowed in," Colt said. "Another week, maybe 2. The word trapped echoed in her chest. He rose to split wood, removing his heavy coat. The cabin grew warm from the fire. He worked in his undershirt, muscles moving under the worn fabric as he swung the axe outside. Evelyn watched him from the doorway. She should have looked away, but she did not. His strength was not like Harlan's. It was not heavy and crushing. It was clean, controlled, every movement precise. Something stirred inside her, a warmth she did not understand. It frightened her. Days passed. She grew stronger. She swept the cabin, cooked what little food he had, washed dishes in melted snow. She needed to feel useful. One evening, as he oiled his rifle, he spoke without looking at her. "When the pass clears, I'll ride you back to town." The spoon fell from her hand. "No." He looked up slowly. "You can't stay here." "He'll kill me," she said. "Who?" "Harland Riggs." The name sat heavy in the air. Colt's jaw tightened. He knew the name. "He's my stepfather," she lied quickly. "Cruel man. I ran." Colt studied her. He knew the story did not fit the dress, but he saw the terror in her eyes. "Eat your stew," he said finally. He did not press further. That night, something changed between them. As they spoke more. Small things at first. Weather, tracks, the names of birds. He listened when she talked. Truly listened. It was new to her. One night, steam filled the cabin as he washed at the basin. She pretended to sleep, but watched through half-closed eyes. He caught her staring. Their eyes met through the steam. There was no demand in his gaze, only hunger. Lonely hunger. She turned away, her heart racing. The next morning, she could barely look at him. She dropped a plate. Burned bread. Her hands trembled. "Snow's clearing south," he said quietly. She stood and walked toward him before she lost her nerve. She reached out and brushed her fingers over the back of his hand. He inhaled sharply. "You're too big," she whispered without thinking. The words were not fear now. They were wonder. But I'll take it." He stepped back like she had struck him. "Don't say that," he said hoarsely. "You don't know what you're asking." She stepped closer. "I know you're not him." His face twisted with pain. "You don't know me," he said. "I was branded in Texas. They said I forced a woman. I never did. Spent 3 years locked away for a lie." He looked at his scarred hands. "I swore I'd never touch a woman again, not unless she begged. Clear enough no one could twist it." Silence filled the cabin. Evelyn stepped forward until her hand rested against his chest. His heart pounded under her palm. "Then let me beg," she said softly. He closed his eyes. "God help me," he breathed. Their first kiss was not fierce. It was slow, careful, like stepping onto thin ice. He asked at every touch. His eyes searched hers for fear, but she found none, only relief. When she cried, he pulled away in panic. "I hurt you." "No," she sobbed. "It's not pain, it's release." In his arms, she was not property, not debt, not shame. She was a woman choosing. Morning came with sunlight and silence. They did not speak of it, but something unspoken bound them tighter than any vow. A week later, the snow melted enough to ride. Colt returned from checking lower trails with a face like stone. "Pack," he said. Her heart dropped. "Men in the valley," he continued, "asking about a runaway bride. Reward posted." Her lie fell apart inside her. "That was my wedding day," she confessed. "Harland is my husband. My father sold me." Colt went still. Then rage exploded through him. He swept dishes from the table. "A husband," he growled. "By law, you're his property." "They'll hang you," she whispered. "Let them try," he said. They decided to run north that very night. But before dawn, riders reached the lower ridge. Shots echoed through the canyon. Colt fought like a storm, fierce and brutal. He drove one man down, but a bullet tore through his shoulder. Evelyn did not freeze. She grabbed a rifle. She aimed. She fired. The riders scattered. She hauled Colt onto the horse and rode until his blood soaked her hands. She stitched his wound with shaking fingers under the open sky. "You are not dying," she whispered. "Not here." They rode until she saw white houses in a green valley, a Quaker settlement. They took Colt in without question. He lived. They rested. But news followed. A warrant, $500 for Colt's head, and in the return of Harlan's wife. Colt came to her that night. "I'll turn myself in," he said quietly. "You'll be safe." She struck him across the face. "You fool," she whispered. "I will not go back." They went to Judge Thorne. She stood before a packed hall and told the truth. Every ugly word. "My father sold me," she said. "There was no consent." The hall went silent. The judge ruled the marriage void. She was free. The charges against Colt were dismissed. Harlan left in fury. That night, under a quiet sky, Colt stood by the window. "You're free now," he said softly. "You can choose anyone." She walked to him. "I choose you." And for the first time, Colt believed he might be more than what the world had branded him. Freedom did not feel loud. It felt quiet. The morning after the judge struck down the marriage, Evelyn stood outside the Quaker settlement and watched the sun rise over the open plains. No chains, no vows, no father speaking for her. She was simply Evelyn Hayes. Colt stood a few steps behind her. He had not slept much. Freedom sat on him differently. It felt fragile, like something that could be taken back at any moment. "We can stay," Obadiah had offered. "Work the land. Be among friends." But Colt knew they did not belong inside borrowed peace. They needed their own ground. So they rode north to a stretch of high land near a spring that ran clear and cold. It was rough country. Wind cut hard across the ridge, but it was open. It was wide. It was theirs. The cabin did not rise in a day. It rose in blisters and sweat. Colt felled pine trees with steady blows of his axe. His shoulder scar pulled tight with every swing. But he did not slow. He was building something no judge could grant, and no man could sell. Evelyn worked beside him. She cleared brush, carried water, packed mud between the logs to seal the walls against winter wind. Her hands grew calloused. Her back grew strong. At night, they sat by their own small fire, not hiding, not running, just breathing. Winter came hard that first year. Snow buried the fences. Wind howled across the roof. Some nights the cold crept into the bones no matter how high the fire burned. But when nightmares came, they faced them together. When Colt woke, gasping, thinking he was back in a prison cell, Evelyn would place his hand on her heart. "You're home," she would whisper. When she jolted awake smelling whiskey that was not there, he would wrap his arms around her. "I've got you," he would murmur. But the land shaped them. Spring came with stubborn green shoots pushing through frozen ground. Evelyn planted a garden with seeds Ruth had given her. Potatoes, corn, beans. She knelt in the dirt and pressed life into soil that had once felt as empty as her chest. Colt built fences in a small stable. He trained 2 wild mustangs with patience, not force. Boys from the settlement sometimes came to watch. Angry boys. Quiet boys. Boys who had lost fathers on the trail. Colt taught them how to hold a rope without cruelty, how to calm a frightened animal without striking it. "Strength ain't about breaking," he would say. "It's about guiding." Evelyn became something unexpected. Women from scattered homesteads began riding to her cabin. Some came heavy with child. Some came with bruises they claimed were accidents. Yet Evelyn did not ask too many questions. She listened. She helped deliver babies in sod huts and wagons. She boiled water. She stitched torn skin. She whispered to frightened girls that there was always a road north if they needed it. She was no longer a runaway bride. She was a woman who had stood in a hall full of men and spoken truth. Years turned. One summer evening, as the sky burned orange, Evelyn stood outside their cabin and felt a strange weakness wash over her. She had been tired for days. Her body felt different. That night she told him, "I'm with child," she said softly. She expected fear. She expected silence. Colt dropped to his knees in front of her. He placed his scarred hand gently against her stomach, as if he were touching something holy. "A child," he whispered, voice breaking. She started to cry. "I'm afraid," she admitted. He pressed his forehead against her belly through the thin cotton of her dress. "Then I'll build a world strong enough to hold both of you," he said. He kissed her stomach like a vow. Pregnancy was not easy. The winters felt longer. The winds louder. Fear crept in sometimes, whispering of men like Harland and laws written by cruel hands. But every time fear rose, she looked at the cabin they had built, the fences, the garden, the horses grazing in the pasture. This was not the world she had been sold into. This was one she had chosen. The baby came in early spring. Snow still clung to the far ridges, but wildflowers had begun to bloom near the cabin. Ruth rode up from the settlement to help. Colt waited outside, pacing like a caged animal. Hours passed. Then he heard it. A cry. Sharp. Strong. Alive. Ruth opened the cabin door with a tired smile. "You have a daughter," she said. Colt stepped inside slowly, as if entering sacred ground. Evelyn lay pale, but smiling, a small bundle in her arms. He approached the bed like a man who had once been told he was unworthy of goodness. Evelyn lifted the child toward him. "She's ours," she whispered. He reached out carefully, hands that had fought and built and bled, now trembling as he held something smaller than anything he had ever touched. The baby opened her eyes. Gray, like his. Colt swallowed hard. "I'll never let the world touch her the way it touched you," he said quietly. Evelyn smiled. "You don't have to fight the whole world," she answered. "Just build something better inside it." Years later, people would speak of the cabin on the ridge, but they would speak of the midwife who listened and the horseman who trained wild colts with quiet hands. They would speak of the little girl who ran barefoot through wildflowers, laughing so loud it echoed across the plains. Harland Riggs faded into rumor. The prison brand on Colt's shoulder faded into scar. But the story of the runaway bride who chose her own life did not fade. One evening, long after the garden had been harvested and their daughter was asleep inside, Evelyn stood barefoot in the grass and watched Colt ride home across the ridge. He was not running. He was not being chased. He was just coming home. He swung down from the saddle and walked toward her with that rare, crooked grin she had come to love. You're too big, she teased softly, stepping into his arms. He laughed, deep and warm. And you still taking me? Always, she answered. He lifted her off the ground, just like he had done that first spring after the trial. She laughed, full and fearless. The sound carried across the open land. It was not the laugh of a girl sold for debt. It was the laugh of a woman who had survived. It was the sound of love chosen. It was the sound of home.